Welcome back to the Shuffle Squad. We are doing another meta forecast here for your enjoyment, so you can learn all about the decks that you need to play, or maybe some of the techs that you need to play in the decks that you're already choosing for the next big event. Now, we're looking at Charlotte Regionals coming up this weekend being one of the biggest, maybe the biggest event of the season in North America right now, with the majority of masters all loaded into this thing. So we're getting everybody geared up here. We've got a lot of awesome guests, and I'm just going to kick it right off with the first guest here I have on this meta forecast, none other than Zach Lesage here. Zach, why don't you let the people know who you are?
Yo, I'm Zach. I'm part of the Shuffle Squad, so shout out to Shuffle Squad, subscribe to the Shuffle Squad channel, and unfollow us on Twitter. I think it'd be funnier with that way. I've been playing the game since 2005. Most notable accomplishments would likely be 2020 Collinsville Regional Champion, or 2019 Collinsville Regional Champion, Players Cup 2 Champion, 2020 OCIC International Championship finalist. But more notably and more recently, I guess I have 3-day 2s this season so far, and we're almost at that invite. I'm just a little bit short, but took a mental health break, and we're back for Charlotte, so we're ready to go.
Yes, the world's shortest hiatus in Pokemon TCG, Zach. So as far as it goes, you're cured, and we're ready to go for Charlotte. So next, the local Tina enjoyer here, we have Dan Hugar also on the cast. Dan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hey guys, I'm Dan. Nice to meet you all. I've been playing since about 2018. This year, I apparently learned how to play Pokemon, so I've played in 5 events and gotten no worse than top 64 in all of them. I got top 8 at San Antonio, bubbled out of top 8 in Portland. Always play out your last round, kids. And otherwise, just got my invite over the weekend in Portland. So I'm like 21st or 22nd in North America right now. So I can play Pokemon. Listen to at least some things I have to say.
Got a lot of good knowledge in that brain, Dan. We're going to lead it off with the casting host with the most. Lyric is here with us on this meta forecast. Lyric, let the people know who you are.
What's up, everybody? It's your favorite Shuffle Squad personality hired Lyric here. Nowhere near that invite, and nowhere near that day 2 probably this weekend, but I was close to San Antonio with 531. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who watched the vlog. It will be coming back for Charlotte, and I'm super excited for that. Yeah, I'm Lyric. I just started playing literally officially 1 year this week. And I've been to 5 regionals within that 1 year, better and better each time. 04 drop at Hartford to 531 at San Antonio. So that's a lot of progress, and that's all been with Miraidon. And as the most of the Shuffle people know now, I'm the Miraidon queen here, and that's all that I'm here to talk about today.
Perfect.
So glad to be back.
Well, we have a brand new host with us on this meta forecast, the filthy Mew enjoyer of the group here. We do have Maddox here. Maddox, why don't you let the people know who you are?
Hey everyone, I'm Maddox Corcoran. I'm also called Maddox sometimes for anyone who likes the Mew vmax deck. I'm based out of Jacksonville, Florida, and do a lot of work at the Beach Court podcast. Really, my accomplishments really just kind of hopped back into the game a little over a year ago, and most recently had a 3rd place finish with that filthy Fusion Mew deck, as PJ alluded to, in Portland just a couple weekends ago. But I've been playing a lot of Mew. We'll occasionally play some different decks, but got my invite last year and on track for it again this year, and just excited to be here as the co-host.
Awesome. Well, I mean, there's a lot of knowledge here with everybody on this meta forecast, so I hope you at home watching this are getting a lot out of it too. So we're going to hop right into it and start talking about the meta for Charlotte. That's what you came here to watch anyway. So let's start it off with the biggest, baddest deck in the format right now. We're going to talk about Giratina. Now, Giratina was posed really well going into the last regionals. Now, after John Ang has won with Giratina, and it also was not only the 1st place, but also the 2nd place, had multiple top 8 slots here. We're going to talk about Giratina. So, Zach, I want to ask you, do you think Giratina is posed well now going into Charlotte after it saw so much success, a couple weekends ago?
Is Tina the best deck in format? I'd have to say yes. I think it kind of we've kind of gone in this like cyclical format with Paradox Rift, where we went Gardevoir as best deck in format, then Miraidon, then Charizard, then Tina. So it seems like we're continuously countering the biggest deck in format every couple weeks. And at this point, I'd probably say that Tina's the best deck in format. Probably not at a point where it's going to be heavily countered, because Tina is probably the least counterable out of all of them due to having a mid matchup range, where if you're able to outplay your opponent and have a decent hand to set up, we've seen it where Mew is probably the biggest counter that we could see to the deck. And that matchup, I wouldn't put past a 60-40 or a 40-60, whichever way you're looking at it, in negative favor of Tina. So I think that we're going to see a few counters to it, but at the same time, the bigger winner from Portland might have been Mew. So we might see more counters to Mew than counters to Tina, even though Tina came first and second.
Awesome. And Dan, you and I have also talked about that a little bit too, where are there counters to Tina? But we've realized that Tina kind of loses to itself more than anything else. Do you think that maybe we're going to see a little bit more disruption in the format than we have in some of these decks that have proved to be pretty consistent the way that they're built? Maybe we're throwing back more Ionos or more Judge Paths, things like that. What do you think, Dan?
It's a good question. I think the way I've been kind of talking about and thinking about Tina over the past couple weeks is, do you need to be prepared to kind of handle the mirror match better? So kind of like Zach said, there's no like clean counter, because you can spread damage counters, you can attack the active, you can delete things, like you can do everything that's good offensively in the Pokemon trading card game. So any time someone tries to counter one piece of that, you can come back with another piece of it. So I think the biggest question for me is, if you are playing Tina, do you have to start including things like Manaphy, like Jirachi, like whatever else? And to be honest, kind of to what Zach said about playing around your opponent, I've not included Manaphy or anything for the last couple tournaments, purely because like you don't need it to win. So I think the big question for me is, what is the most important weapon Tina has against your deck, and what are the pieces you're going to play to counter that? So something like Gardevoir, you have to play Manaphy, you have to play Jirachi. Something like Mew, Tina can play Tomb, you got to play one or two of the Fusion Energy if you're playing DTE Mew. But it's so hard because I think Tina is just so inherently strong that, honestly, PJ, maybe that disruption is the right way to go about countering it, but that's moving from including a tech card to changing the entire like mechanism and function of your deck. So I think it'd be hard for someone to kind of come at a single matchup in the meta by warping their entire deck around it and hope to be successful against everything else they see.
Exactly right. And I think that that's where Tina has come so far now, is that there were a lot of different lists out there playing a lot of different techs, and now we've kind of got this honed in list where everything feels better, right? We've got Counter Catcher in the meta. Now, I know that from somebody who plays Miraidon as their perspective, you're trying to just like hunt down those Tina Vs before they evolve. There was the Judge Path build. So, Lyric, why don't you talk to me a little bit about what your local metas have looked like? I know that Tina's not for the faint of heart. Not everybody can play a Giratina list because it does play a lot different than Lost Box does. So have you seen a lot of players trying to adapt and play this newer list of Giratina? And that's kind of going to translate into what we see at Charlotte.
So I think Miraidon Giratina has definitely evolved in a certain way, right? I think the last regional I played at in San Antonio, it was just more so like, all right, we hands that Comfy the moment we see it, right? We get ahead on those prizes going 2-2-2. But now I'm feeling like we're seeing some lists now play with the EXP share, and with 2 Raichus and less Raikos. I think Miraidon right now, especially versus Giratina, can go 100 different ways, right? And a lot of people are talking about Charm versus EXP share. Well, it's going to get vacuumed. Well, to be quite honest, it's going to get vacuumed anyway, so you might as well just throw it down. I think for me, I'm really enjoying Miraidon with EXP share versus Tina now that I can EXP share a Raichu, get an extra energy onto that Raichu, and then be able to swing with much less resources being used, much less of a like, I really hope this generator hits, and more so like a, hey, I have the Dynamotor, maybe I only need that attach for turn. the matchup is certainly going a different way, but honestly, with double hands now, which I'm playing, it's been a lot more fun. And I know we're going to be talking about Miraidon real soon, but ancient or future booster capsule's also been a really good time. So yeah, I don't know. Miraidon's in a good spot, but versus Tina, I think it is still just a coin flip. Both decks can brick equally. Tina throwing down path turn 1 versus Miraidon can obviously just like absolutely like ruin your deck and ruin your day. So it's still up in the air, but I think with new builds of Miraidon, it can be played differently.
For sure. And then Maddox, as far as you go in, with your run in Portland, coming up against a lot of these Tina players, do you think that Tina is a deck that if you haven't played Giratina in a while, a lot of players were struggling, learning how to play the deck? Is it something that maybe you were able to capitalize on some of the missteps that were being thrown out there by other players sitting at the opposite side of the table from you?
Yeah, I think as a lot of more players go to Giratina and start to say, this is a deck that we want to spend more time with and try to say, oh, hey, just one, let me run this. There is still a lot of complexity to it. I'm sure Dan can, have a whole hour to talk about it. But sometimes those resources, right, they're sometimes, pitching that super rod early. Oh, well, I needed this other card. Like, well, did you, right? Sometimes those micro decisions, which energy you're putting into play and putting in the lost zone, all those come back to bite you. So anyone that's going to go to Charlotte or upcoming regionals playing Giratina, just get very, very comfortable with your lines and really your loose cons, right? If you have plenty of ways to win games. You can go Roxanne, Path, Counter Catcher, and pretty much come back from almost any game. But if you are getting rid of those pieces and aren't preserving those key resources, you have to have the foresight to be able to see far enough and say, this is more important later on than it is right now. And I still have to keep it. So we have to, hurt myself in the short term. Maybe we're not getting that cram hit. Maybe we're not getting a Mirage Gate a turn that we wanted it, but we're setting ourselves up for success later in the game.
Absolutely. All right. Well, now that we've talked everyone's ear off about Giratina, we're going to hop over to a different deck that, I feel like Zach was talking about was considered a BDAF. We just saw this in a money match here as of recently where we saw Jake Gearhart piloting the deck. We're going to talk about Gardevoir EX. Now, Gardevoir has been a solid deck, and it honestly, I think, takes a really good matchup spread into what we have as the meta. So we're going to talk here and go through. Dan, what do you think about Giratina? Is it going to shift the way that the deck plays overall? Are we going to see it just come back with a force because now it's not being beaten down by all of these other decks that just try to punish it? What do you think about Gardevoir?
I mean, I think Gardevoir is an incredible deck, like incredibly strong. It can do anything. It can draw a billion cards. It also is one of the decks that has tools to snipe, to place damage counters, to heal, to tank. Like it can do everything. I think the biggest issue with Gardevoir, and I was kind of surprised it didn't come back in more force for Portland, was that it is so hard to complete best of 3. Because if you lose a game, if you drop a game, like there's no shot you win. So there's going to be a ton of people that tie, don't finish rounds, lose because they lose game 1 and can't finish game 2. But I think from a deck standpoint, like it should have a great time at a Charizard. It should be able to hang with Tina, though Maddox, you make an excellent point of Tina's one of those decks where the skill level of the person playing it matters so much. So it's really hard to quantify that matchup. But I think I'll kind of echo what I said prior to Portland. I think Gardevoir is really, really strong, and if someone plays it optimally, they can go really far if they draw well in game 1 every round. Because if they have to lose game 1, even 5-10 minutes into the round, the odds of them getting a win or even finishing the round are very, very slim. So I think it's excellent, but I think it's a better best of 1 deck than it is
absolutely.
a best of 3 deck.
I can see that for sure. Now, Emily, I know that you haven't spent too much time with Gardevoir itself, but because we see so many newer techs come in here, like I was talking about before, we saw the Deoxys being played in Jake's list. Do we think that we're going to see some of those techs to hit into the BDIF, which we assume is Giratina, going into this event with so many people there?
I think when it comes to like when you're planning out for regionals, I think some people just honestly copy and paste what they see, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we're seeing some success from Jake's list. I thought the money match was really like enjoyable yesterday. I mean, I willingly sat there for 4 hours and just like watched all of it,
Right.
so it had to be some fun. I just I think we are going to see the Deoxys. I think the fun part about like regionals and like these meta forecasts is that we really kind of just have to like go around in circles and be like, well, is this actually going to be played? Like we're talking a lot about Tina, right? But honestly, like I could go to regionals with 2,500 people there and only play maybe one Tina. I only played 2 Zards at San Antonio. Like I didn't play a single Mew at San Antonio. Like I think with Gardevoir kind of evolving right now, I'm anticipating it for sure. I just can't tell how many we are going to be seeing, but the ones that I do think we will be seeing will play the Deoxys vstar because you know what? Why not?
Exactly. Yeah, I do think that it's a good call, going into certain decks. Now, to piggyback off of that, Maddox, do you think that a lot of players are going to start to pick up Gardevoir if they haven't already and just take it to this event? Because again, we're talking about getting close to that 2,500 mark for the amount of masters that are registered for this event. And there's so many people, there's so many decks, the meta's wide open. Do you think people are going to just say, you know what, let's just bring it home with Gardevoir this weekend?
Definitely there's going to be some people that look to do that, right? There's no doubt that throughout the course of this Paradox Rift format that Gardevoir has been very, very powerful. Again, I think the issue, kind of like I was just talking about with Tina, is that there's that skill expression that does play a large part in it. Mm-hmm. When it comes to a deck like Gardevoir, the intrinsic issue of it is that, when you're down 6 prizes to 3, that's right where you want them, theoretically. So your opponent will never scoop because, I'm up 3 prizes. Why would I scoop here? And then I am Gardevoir, I can come back from this. So that line is a difficult part to navigate. I do think a lot of players are going to show up and just say, hey, there's so many people. I'm very comfortable with Gardevoir and I have a lot of skill expression I can do with it. So they will show up and see success with it. Gardevoir is not necessarily a deck that I would recommend picking up if you're listening to this now before Charlotte and saying, hey, I've never played a game of Gardevoir before, but let me show up with it. Not the right pick there, or really any deck we talk about. Just play what you're comfortable with.
Exactly.
But when it comes to Gardevoir specifically, a really, really high power level, again, it's win game 1 or scoop game 1 within, 5 to 10 minutes and play as fast as you can, just so you're not stuck in the tie bracket all day.
Exactly. And then, to kind of make light of that too, we see a lot of decks that are playing Path to the Peak, which obviously counters and shuts off Gardevoir EX's ability, so it can't, move the energy around. So Zach, why don't you talk to me a little bit about the path counters in Gardevoir? Do we think that if you're going to play Gardevoir, you definitely have to play more path outs? We're not necessarily as scared of stall anymore, so maybe we're taking out the Turo, adding another worker. Do you think that might be the play if I was already a Gardevoir player wanting to play Gardevoir for this next event?
Well, I think like starting things off, Bodie Robinson's top 4 list from Portland is probably almost perfect. Mm-hmm. I think Jake Earhart's on some copium with that Deoxys V-Star, and I'm not like, I like Jake, but shots fired. I think the Deoxys sucks. My thoughts. Like, I don't even own Deoxys V-Star in real life, so I'm just going to say, like, we don't got that. But, like, when it comes down to path counters, I think that's where the format is, like, lying around, where it's, like, I think it's, like, something like 6 of the top 8 decks from Portland were all kind of some path disruption-based strategy. So with lists running 1 Artisan, 1 Collapse, 1 Back, 1 Worker, I think that from Bodie's list, you could probably cut a level ball for a second Artisan because that's very similar use case wise. We could also cut the Professor's Research for a second worker if we really wanted to have an answer against Path. If Guardy gets going and you know what you're doing with Guardy, I think that's solid. I mean, all of the Guardy experts handle it. I'm not going to be touching Guardy because I think it's a little too slow for my liking, but I think it's a really good play if you're a really good Gardevoir player. So if I was Bodie and I was going to this event, I'd be playing Gardevoir. If I was Jake, I'd be playing Gardevoir maybe. I don't know. We'd figure it out when we get there. But if you know what you're doing with Gardevoir, you play Gardevoir.
Yeah, maybe it's time to sleeve up that Palkia again, Jake. Anyway, moving on to the yellow deck in the format. Emily, why don't we talk a little bit about Miraidon? I see you've got your Ampharos there. It looks like there's been a couple of different techs. We're already talking about techs going into the list. Do we think we're going to see an Ampharos EX? I know, shout out to our boys Sneaker Talk TCG, been using some Ampharos. We've got some Tapu Koko EX, kind of giving that shout out to the old Sun and Moon format a little bit, but we've got Tapu Koko coming out as a counter. What do you think about these counters being played in Miraidon to make it a little bit more favorable into those Charizards?
So I just want to say, I said this in the vlog, if you see me at a regional, you will be seeing me play Miraidon, not because I want to, but it's because it's what I know. And I think when you go to regionals, you should always just play what you know. There's too many people in the room to specifically counter. Like one, it's like, oh, well, I'm worried about this specific matchup. Don't worry about it. Just play what you want. So Coco, yes, I have been playing Coco just a little bit in my list. I went to locals for the past 2 weeks playing it. The problem is now Zards are starting to play switch outs because it's just a very simple, hey, we could just cut one thing for a switch and then Coco's, usability kind of goes down to 0. For me right now, it's asking whether I want to play a Tapu Koko or if I want to play a second Raikou. I think what's fun about Miraidon right now is that I think we're finally moving towards, hey, we actually don't need 3 Miraidon at all. We're just going to be playing the 2. I've been a vouch for just playing 2 this entire time. Now with, a big bulk count, you can also, grab Mew EX, which has also been really helpful in some of Miraidon's tougher matchups, like Rapid Strike, which has been an absolute pain. I've seen Tapu Koko work out pretty well into that deck, believe it or not, because I believe the highest placing Inteleon Urshifu list is only playing 1 Escape Rope. So if they burn that Escape Rope pretty early, then Koko stays there and Urshifu stays there, and then you're able to switch out and hit him with the Dawn. But the problem is in a best of 3, once you see that play once, you're going to know it's coming again. So it could be a little tricky, but then again, it's just it's a risk, right? I do think there's going to be a very heavy Mew presence. I think the funeral of Mew will be lasting for the next couple regionals. Everyone's just getting sorry Maddox, getting their last licks with Mew in. So honestly, I might be taking out the Coco for a Drapion this weekend because there's nothing better than slapping down that thing in a beach court and saying sorry and taking 3 prizes for that. But I think personally, the Coco's cool. If you want to play Coco, if you're comfortable with Coco, cool. If you want to play 2 Raikou, cool. I'm just a really big fan of that EXP share. Like I think the EXP share is really fun. And like I said earlier, if it's going to get vacuumed anyway, if it's a charm or if it's an EXP share, you might as well just play the EXP share, get another energy onto that chew and have a good time. But yeah. It's another regional for Miraidon.
That's right. I'm telling you, I've been telling you about EXP share for some time now, and nobody was a believer until it started showing up at regionals. But Maddox, let's go over to you. Talk to me about this, 18 energy build, Peony Miraidon. Have you played it? Have you seen it? Do you think that it's going to come back with some vengeance?
Peony Miraidon. I first saw the deck. Nick Robinson saw a lot of success with it.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was so fun. Right now I'm here like, oh, turn 1 Iron Hands is so easy. Playing against my friend playing Gardevoir, it's just like, yeah, you can't do anything about this Iron Hands. You go and play some other matchups. Even in the thing, there's some matchups where I just am there. Like at turn 3, I'm like, I can't do anything. I have 3 energy in my hand. I have no energy on board. I had to discard my Flaffy turn 1. I got nothing else to do. It definitely has some longevity issues. I think right now, just with the way that the meta is shaping up, that a more conventional Path Miraidon build, similar to what Nick Moffitt played this recently in Portland, or even the Path builds of old, like what Juho played to LAIC. I think something like that is just situated a little bit better for right now. The Peony Miraidon is going to see a lot of success if you're hitting those right matchups. If you're hitting, if you hit 9 Guardies, you're going to go 9-0. Right? Just some of those matchups are going to be very polarizing. And a good point, I was talking with Adam Reinhardt, top 8 at Pittsburgh with Miraidon, where he says, hey, the Peony Miraidon makes your good matchups just better and makes your bad matchups worse. So if you're going to, instead, if you're going to say, if you want to go and take the high roll approach and just say, hey, I'm going to make sure I definitely beat these good matchups, or just say, hey, I'm going to meet somewhere in the middle and have a little bit better spread across the board to maybe see a little more success in day one of the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. And Zach, I know you're great with doing meta calls here as far as what to play for events. Now, if you were a Miraidon player, would you gravitate for this upcoming event, seeing the success of Charizard, the success of Giratina, going with that faster paced, peony build, or would you kind of, go back to Yuho's or JW Krewall's Judge Path build and try to play it from that perspective?
Solid question. I think that Nick Robinson had it pretty close to where the metagame should be. Or sorry, not Nick Robinson. I mean, Nick Robinson's list is cool. Nick Moffat.
Right.
It's just so many Nicks that are playing Miraidon. I think that Nick Moffat's list from Portland was pretty cool with the experience share, with the double Raichu. I think Tapu Koko might not be good anymore because Azul did have Switch in the deck. Tina's playing a bunch of Switch cards, Switch Escape Ropes. But what I did, I cut that card from his list for a Luxray AV because it gives me kind of a partial paralysis play. And maybe I could judge my opponent and use the first attack to rip a card from their hands. So when in doubt, it gives me some flexibility in a large tournament. But maybe Tapu Koko is good. I think it could be good in other matchups too. So I think it depends on how the metagame's stacked against it. I'd actually say with the regionals being so large, majority of people's lists are actually outdated for this event.
Yep, absolutely. And then Dan, going into a meta, from the perspective of somebody who just plays one specific deck. If you've played Miraidon, you're always going to play Miraidon. You're looking at this event. Are you cutting the flaffies? You're just going straight in. You're going to just play what you know, or you're just going to play it old school and try to just accelerate those energies the old school way instead of an EXP share. And then hopefully nobody plays Sableye and De-Evolution TM in their deck. What do you think about that going into this meta?
I personally am actually an advocate, weirdly enough, as someone who's lived by Giratina for decades now. I'm actually an advocate of trying and playing new things and being willing to mess around with stuff, not even with the intent of, hey, this is going to be my deck for the whole regional, but to get a sense of how other decks function, what kind of the mechanisms are, and then try to apply that to an area where you do feel comfortable and do have that insight and expertise. So I think I say that here, and I actually hate hearing about experience share as someone playing Giratina because that seems super hazardous. And to be blunt, I think a lot of the criticism of Miraidon has been that it's a one-trick pony. You get to do your one thing super quick, super efficiently, and that's it. That's the deck. And if it doesn't work, great, I'll go first or I'll go second. But I think having something like experience share that lets you leverage MuEX more, lets you leverage hands, leverage Raichu, give you a little more flexibility in how you respond to your opponent, I think that's a great inclusion. And I have no idea what Miraidon would not want to play Flaffy, and I can see Emily's response when you said that, and I agree with it. That thing is a necessity. I will actually say, I would love to see at least one person squeeze an Ampharos EX into the deck because I do think closed deck list, you can have a huge advantage of surprise. And if you can slap down something that can tank a hit and take a big knockout with a Judge Path or something like that, that actually seems kind of terrifying. And also a good point, though, about that's a game one scenario. But if I now know that I need to play around this big old Pokemon getting slapped down and knocking my guy out, and I maybe need to proactively target that Flaffy, congratulations, I just gave you another turn because I only took one prize, not two. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for creativity there, more so than you may think, but I will always advocate for deck decisions that give you some more flexibility and agency over how you respond. So I love the experience shares.
And I do like the innovation. We all love a spicy play here on the Shuffle Squad. So as far as it goes, we're going to talk about a deck that might not be a spicy play, but it's a deck that we haven't really seen do well or perform in a little bit now. We're going to be talking about Sablezard. Now, obviously, that's a scary 4-letter word when we're a Giratina player, but Sablezard seems like it might be posed well into this upcoming meta. So I want to talk about that a little bit. Maddox, what do you think about Sablezard? We obviously saw Christian Fontenot do really well overseas with it at that regional, and it didn't necessarily translate well when Christian was playing it over here in San Antonio, as well as I'm sure Christian wanted it to. But do you think that now is the time? Maybe Sablezard, somebody will brush the dust off and bring it to this regional here.
Yeah, definitely it is a time to look at it, right? In my testing groups since Portland, the question has been, hey, is Sablezard a maybe valid play right now? When trying to say what decks can beat Giratina, the question is, one of the things we've looked at a lot is saying, hey, Sablezard, pretty favorable, just able to go and chain those Sableyes, those one prize attackers. Giratinas aren't playing Jirachi, so Sableye can just kind of do a lot of work there.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we know that Sablezard has a lot of potential with the inclusion of TM Devolution. Against Charizard, if they're not playing Jirachi, I think it's heavily favored for Sablezard if
Mhm.
Charizard lists do not have that Jirachi type of thing. And even it has seen a little bit of success, right? Justin Tang just got 11th top 16 with it in Portland. So it is a deck that's around. Again, I think it's something that is maybe a little better position now if we expect Miraidon to not show up as much. The issue for that is that turn 1 Iron Hands, where you now need to pull off a Raihan plus find your double turbo and go respond with the Radiant Charizard, which is pretty tough to pull off sometimes. I do, however, think that with it just being such a large regional, so many players, especially out here on the East Coast, and many players that are saying, hey, I only get to go to one regional, let me go to Charlotte. A lot of them will be showing up with their Miraidon deck. So watch out for those Iron Hands. But if you're comfortable with exactly, I watch out for Lyric and Miraidon. But if you like Lost Box and you like Sablezard, this might be the time to sneak it back out.
Absolutely. And Zach, I know recently you were just playing a Sablezard deck. So as far as some of the techs are going, obviously Jirachi is definitely favorable going into any other Lost Zone deck with a Sableye on the other side of the board. When you have Jirachi and Manaphy in your deck, we know that that's good. Obviously, it works in Gardevoir. What are your takes on all of the fanciness of Sablezard, like the extra Lost Vacuums, the extra Raihans? Are you liking how that deck is shaping up, or no?
I think the deck is it's about as interesting as you want to make it.
Mm-hmm.
The build that I've been playing around with has Roaring Moon in it right now, so I think that one's really cool. Because Roaring Moon solves a lot of issues when it comes to Snorlax, Rapid Strike, Urshifu. Just having that gigantic KO potential. While it didn't work for me at my recent cup, I made a lot of fundamental mistakes with the list. I went 0-2 drops, so shout out to that. But I did learn a lot about how the deck could be built, and I think it scratched the itch that I was thinking of should I play this? Is this deck better than Tina? I think if I was playing any deck that had Lost Zone cards in it, I think you should be playing Lost Zone Tina. Sablezard's a good deck though, so if you're a Sablezard player, I don't think it's a bad play. Again, every deck's trying to just avoid a few tough matchups. Sablezard seems really good on paper, but don't let that get to your head.
Right. And obviously, from somebody who does play the other Lost Zone deck, Dan, why don't we talk about Jirachi in this matchup? Is that what really sets it apart? Because obviously, Radiant Charizard hitting for 250, De-Evolution TM, those are scary things, but I think that the scariest part of Sablezard is honestly the combination of Manaphy and Jirachi on the opposing bench. Would you agree with that or disagree?
I think Manaphy is less of a big deal. Being able to Ninja Snipe's great, so if you can, that's awesome. Jirachi, I think, can be the more problematic portion of that. I think the biggest issue for Tina into Sablezard is that it's so hard to do your path disruption play because they don't need to play into it. They can let themselves stay at 4 prizes until they're going to sweep your board or put themselves in kind of a checkmate position. I do think if you are playing Jirachi into Sablezard, that is going to make their life real hard because their only attacks are Lost Mine, Spit Innocently, and then Radiant Combustion Blast, whatever Radiant Charizard does. But that's it. So I will say Sablezard is by far Tina's scariest matchup, and I think it's the only one that well, outside of Mew, it's the only one that's like real,
Mm-hmm.
real unfavored. So I think it's a great play, and I know some of my friends and I have been talking about it, of it being a good play. The thing to keep in mind is that for matchups where they do kind of evolve themselves out of your reach, you really need to have Devo TM in the list, and you really need to be able to use it effectively in
Right.
order to win those matchups. So I think it could be a great play. I do think Jirachi is probably its biggest problem, or
Mm-hmm.
giant HP guys. But if you're able to play around that effectively, you could be
Oh
in a
yeah,
really
for
good
sure.
spot.
And I do think that you're exactly right. Rapid Strike is definitely a scary deck. If you ever come across that, chances are you probably only see one in day one, or maybe even two if you're really having some bad luck. But I think that the biggest problem or the biggest hurdle is that if you're playing a lot of these other decks that are slower, um, you're going to have a problem getting to all three games. So, Lyric, when I talked to you about this a little bit, getting through all three games as a Sablezard player, you're on the other side of a Gardevoir EX player, which we were just talking about Guardi EX and time issues. Do you think that you're going to tie too much with a Sablezard deck going into this
It's very
regional?
interesting, PJ, because I think while Sablezard is like definitely the way that it's going, there has been a lot of talks thanks to the kitchen about the Seven Deadly Sins build,
Mm.
which also has the Aqua Storm at the end, which is like literally like let's just throw all of the Lost Zone archetypes together and make something happen. And I've played against it a lot on ladder, and to be quite honest, I never like I see the Giratina, I pop it, I'm like, cool, they haven't dropped another Giratina, and before I know it, I'm in Aqua Storm range. Um, it's very interesting because I think that build can kind of work around that time thing, right? Which is why, personally, while yes, Miraidon is my one trick pony, and I like my one trick pony, my one trick pony goes faster than any other deck in the format. So I personally have not had to worry about a tie at all based off of my fault. It could be my opponent's fault, but I don't like to call slow playing unless we're really taking 5 minutes to refinement of VIP past turn 3. You know what I'm saying? I just think like if you are playing like a deck that like don't go for the tie, man. We know why ties are, they can bite you back later in those day twos and those win and ins. Don't go for the tie, go for the win. Eating more than 2 ties, really does kind of hurt you. And I was really lucky to go through all of San Antonio without tying. And then actually, just at the end at round 9 when I was 5-3, hitting a shuffle squad teammate and us looking at each other and be like, yo, food. And I was just like, yep, let's do it. So go fast. But as much as I am looking at Sablezard, I really am looking at this Seven Deadly Sins thing. I'm 100% going to get Aqua Stormed at Charlotte. I'm ready for it. And shout out to the kitchen for discovering it. It's really cool.
Absolutely. And we do love all the Lost Zone variants, so we didn't want to necessarily focus too hard on there. But, we were talking about Miraidon being a one-trick pony, and we know a deck that, a lot of people, they have close to their heart. But it's more than a one-trick pony because you could play it multiple different ways, and that's Mew vmax. And we know that there's 2 different builds. We've got the Fusion Mew and the DTE Mew, and we're honestly thinking that the DTE, or Double Turbo Energy, for those who don't understand the acronym at home, that build might be better here because I feel like Charizard, being such a great deck, is going to be the better way to play the deck. So, Zach, why don't you talk to me a little bit about the 2 builds? Do you think DTE is the better way? Are we still going to see Mew with the amount of, Spiritomb out there?
So I've always been. I'm going to go where the minds in the game go.
Mm-hmm.
Maddox had actually in this chat call, whatever, had the best finish with Mew recently across the world. So that's sick. At the same time, I think it's hard to argue against reigning world champion Vance Kelly and literally goated player Ian Robb. So I think like going with the new hybrid version of Mew and those discoveries is probably where I would approach. I think I've seen Fusion Mew forever. Fusion Mew's either brought me success or it's burned me in the past. I haven't really experimented with hybrid Mew as much as I should be. That's Path to the Peak Mew with 2 Fusion Strike energies, with an Alice Sparkle, so you can cram to get around all these Spiritomb techs. I think it kind of brings the best of both worlds to the deck. So I think I'd probably go with that newly discovered build more than anything else.
Gotcha. And then Maddox, somebody who told me at Portland Regional, sometimes there's just that one Mew player that dodges all the good matchups. Do you think there's going to be a couple more of those people at Charlotte Regionals because, the sample size is growing a little bit?
100%. I mean, again, there always seems to be one Mew that just has this ridiculously hot start and, ends day one 8-1 or 9-0 or 8-0-1 or something like that. Again, it's just a deck that, when it's setting up and when it's firing on all cylinders, it's really, really hard to stop it. And if you're especially dodging those Spiritombs or hitting favorable matchups, then Mew can definitely go on a long run. I think with so many people there, Mew is still a very, very strong play for Charlotte.
Yeah.
Obviously what I'd be playing if I was going. But again, it's just a solid play. Definitely a deck you need to be ready for.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dan, we talked about how Mew is scary for Giratina. Obviously can play Choice Belt, which is a little spooky with all the power tablets. We're now shifting gears to how it's played. So a Spiritomb and Path might not necessarily be as scary to a Mew player. Do you think that we're going to see any other sort of shifts to how Mew's played? Do you think they're going to be faster? Do you think that we're just going to see more disruption like we were talking about earlier in those lists specifically that are going to help Mew dominate? Like it did when we were looking at the Japanese meta and how Giratina was the best deck. Mew came in, took it down a couple notches, and then Giratina, they went back and forth. Do you think that we're going to see some adaptation of Mew that maybe we haven't necessarily seen at the top?
I think, and this is kind of going to what Zach was saying, and Maddox, defer to you though, because clearly you know what you're doing. I think the DTE build is the best overall deck because it has more draw supporters, more disruption, it does more things that the Pokemon trading card game sees as good. The Fusion Strike build, just as a Fusion Strike, I think the power ceiling that it has with being able to one-shot anything with the 4 Fusion Energy down, being able to use single prize attackers, being able to snipe with Ice Cube, I think those are all awesome things, but it's all just more pieces that you need to either figure out or get down or get around, and it gives your opponent ways to play through your typical, I'm going to make you take 7 prizes, now someone can go 1, 2, 3 to try to win the game. So I think in general, I would definitely be more scared of kind of that hybrid deck where the DTE with just the 2 Fusion Energy, maybe 1 Sparkle, which are there purely just to say the number 1 counter to Mew is Spiritomb, and now I can handle that. And it also makes me think that if people want to counter Mew, there may be more of a tendency to go towards Drapion, because that truly does hard counter Mew, because if you're able to bounce a path and one-shot a VMAX with a 2-prizer, you can get yourself far enough ahead where it's easier for you to stay up and stay on pace while Mew's trying to judge path you going forward. So I personally hate Drapion because the only matchup it helps against is Mew and maybe a little bit Rapid Strike if you get super clever with it. But I think the DT Mew really is the best one. I think Fusion Mew's scary for other reasons. And like Maddox is saying, the deck's just good. Yeah. It can just, when it hits, when you flip heads on crams, you can just run over any and everything. So it's going to see some success. And if I remember correctly, there are 4 or 6 Mew in the top 16 of Portland. The deck absolutely crushed people, and I do not like to see that. I hate that deck. Sorry, man. So I am very much hoping it settles, but I think it'll probably be a pretty big part of it.
And honestly, Emily, going back to you, exactly what you were saying is this might be the last tournament people get to play Mew in its standard format. So that's where, are you in the thought process of people are just going to sleeve up Mew because they've been playing it so long? It's been here for almost 2 years. It's probably the last big event that people are getting to play it. It's also a relatively low cost deck. So people who are spending all the money to get to the regionals, are they going to be bringing Mew VMAX to this one?
Yeah. I think Mew is a great pick. Pokemon has printed 100 cards to kill this deck, and they can't. Obviously, it's a great deck. It always performs well. You're only really ever losing to yourself because Mew always has it. I have a personal vendetta against this deck though, because I'll like go 3-0 at a challenge and I feel great out of 5 rounds, and I'll hit the Mew player that's like, oh, my hand's not that great, then flips heads on Cram. I do think DTE is a little bit better than Fusion, but I do think Fusion's always just a little bit more spicy, right? Because it can get around those like big bumps that, you know, a lot of other decks can throw down, right? So we're getting around Spirit Tomb. We're getting around Path if it needs it. I mean, PJ, you said it best. Judge Path Prey sometimes as the Mew players. And that's just kind of how it goes. But I think Meloetta is always such a like a spicy attacker because it is a single prizer. It can throw out, you know, that 220 onto Miraidon that makes me want to cry every time that gets it turn 1. But I do think, you know, DTE Mew is going to be here this weekend. I'm very scared. I'm going to throw in a Spirit Tomb. I used to just throw in a Drapion and just be like, yeah, 3 prizes, and then I'll find the other 2 somewhere else. But I'd rather just not let y'all set up at all. Yeah. So I was thinking about Giacomo at one point. I was like, yo, let me throw Giacomo in this list, and then, you know, we'll see. Maybe I'll hit a rapid player or something. And nah, Spirit Tomb, the ghost is coming back. But yeah, RIP Mew. Sorry to the Mew players. I'm happy. My 2 hated matchups of Mew and Rapid Strike, out the door April 5th. I'm throwing a party.
All right, we're going to flip the script a little bit because not only are there so many counters to the deck, but I feel like the deck is just heavily countered by this big force in the meta, and that's Charizard EX. So, Dan, we're going to kick it back over to you here. Charizard EX, big scary Pokemon, is a dark Pokemon, hurts Mew a lot. It looks like, you know, the Mew players are just relying on that path to get them through. You know, we've even seen them tech in some grass attackers to try to beat Charizard. Doesn't necessarily fare too well in a big regional event like this. So do you think that Charizard is going to come back with a fiery rage this time around and show Tina who's boss?
I mean, Charizard's such a good deck. Like, I would not be offended if someone called it the best deck in format. It's so strong. Like, Joe from OmniPoke always says this, and I love it. But the deck just has an inevitability about it. Like, you have to completely map out your game plan, because otherwise it's going to one-shot everything, and it's so hard to get through a Charizard. So I don't even know if I would say it comes roaring back. I think just it would regress to the mean. Charizard's going to see more success. Like, it's still super strong, still super powerful, and I think in a field of 2,200 players, there's a lot to be said about just playing a super powerful deck and saying, you know what, man, I'm going to ask a lot of questions of everyone I'm playing against of, can you get through my guys? And more often than not, they may not have the answer. The one thing I would say is, like, you see Azul having such success with the deck, but honestly, man, I could give that guy a theme deck and he'd probably get top 16 at least. So I don't know if that's the best data point in favor of this, but I think because you get to Pidgeot each turn and get the single card you need, there is a lot of skill expression, but at the same time, you can rare candy 2 Charizard EX turn 2 and just win. And there doesn't need to be a whole lot of skill involved with that. So I think it does have just that power there that can carry people rather than people have to like carry it. Like you see something with Tina or even Mew at times where you have to sequence perfectly, draw well. Charizard, if you just hit Candy Zard, like, you can cruise through a lot of things. So I think it'll be there. I think it'll be in force. I think it's a great deck still and not a bad play. Just keep in mind that everyone else knows it's good. And of the top decks, it's probably one of the ones that's more easily countered by things like Path, by Tina, by whatever else people want to try to throw at it.
And going back to you, Emily, we know Charizard's a deck that you don't have to announce a lot of attacks with. But we do see a lot of techs getting thrown into this deck list. Do you think that because, you know, we saw TMD evolution, if I'm a Charizard player, would you recommend to me maybe putting something like a Tool Jammer in my deck?
So round 3 at San Antonio, I did play against the Tool Jammer Zard. I was able to kind of get like a cheeky 3 prizes on Illuminion that was kind of benched there with Iron Hands. And then I saw Tool Jammer onto that Bravery Charm. I have to agree with what Dan said. It is, I personally think, lowest of keys. It's much more straightforward than Miraidon is because your win con is rare candy, evolve, and as long as Path isn't there, you're chilling. Like, Pidgeot gets whatever you need. Like, at a Smash tournament 2 weeks ago that I was casting at. We did like a small Swiss. I played Zard. Never played Zard like really ever, but I was like, you know what? These are a bunch of people that I'll probably never play. And literally, I quick searched for boss 3 times and I got it. And that's how I won. Like, there's a lot of things that I think Zard does really well. I do think there are going to be tech cards. I think de-evolution is a really good idea. I think it has kind of like fallen towards the wayside. I think a lot of people have stopped talking about it. I don't think it's necessarily like a bad idea, but the question is, I guess, is there a better card to throw in for that? But it's really hard to say. Personally, for me, I'm not going to be throwing in a de-evolution. I'd rather just throw in my Tapu Koko. But I mean, Azul. This is going to be the Azul conversation because the guy's just doing amazing things with the deck. Azul is going to push that deck, and we're already seeing text for it with switches now inside of the deck. We used to see Choice Belt, now we don't anymore. We used to see Radiant Charizard, now we don't anymore. Like, the deck has plenty of room to kind of grow now, and I still think it is absolutely a threat in this format for anybody that plays on any level, to be quite honest.
Gotcha. I mean, it really is. It's a force to be reckoned with. So, Maddox, hopping over to you, going into the Charlotte Regionals and your mindset, are you going to be pro Zard, or are you going to try to beat Charizard with some of your fancy techs? What do you think? If I am looking at the regional as a whole and I want to play Charizard, I'm going to play the most vanilla list out there. Are you just looking to steamroll some people, or are you looking to just beat it? Am I going to throw in those techs to my deck to beat Charizard because it is so good? Is it a deck that you really have to be worried about?
Again, it's a deck that continues to remain popular, and I think we'll continue to see some success. I think maybe Tina will bump up above it in meta share, maybe a little bit, but I could still even see a world where Charizard's still at that around 12 to 15%. Definitely a deck you need to be ready for. I think it's pretty matchup dependent. Like we said, if your deck loses to 2 Charizards being set up, then hey, maybe you need a TM Devo, maybe need some other piece for it. I think the most important part is just having a clear path to the matchup for it. Whether it's something like Path to the Peak or setting up damage with and then going for a TM Devo, you need to have something to be ready for it because it's going to be there. There's some ability of saying, oh, I'll just dodge the Charizards, but you'll likely hit, if it's 12 or 15%, you're hitting 1 or 2 at that point in your day one. So you need to be ready for it, or just, walk in saying you're comfortable with the losses. If it were me, I'd have something ready for the matchup. And if I could tech 1 card in that would help it significantly, then I would opt for that rather than, leaving it aside. If I'm getting to the spot where I need 2, 3, 4 cards to tech for it, then maybe it's just better taking a loss to it.
Gotcha. And then, Zach, would you agree or disagree as somebody who's played Charizard for a good chunk of our season so far? If you're in that same mindset, are you putting Charizard down for a while and letting it cool off, or are you just going to run hot with Charizard into this event?
I think Charizard's the type of deck that sets up more often than not. So if you're wanting to play all 9 rounds, Charizard is like very cookie cutter. It's very easy to play for 9 rounds. And maybe not like very easy to play, but very easy comparatively to Tina or to Gardevoir or anything else like that. So I think your rate of just being in the game, lack of misplays, and just inherent strength of the deck gives you a good opportunity to see success. So if you're looking to have a good time at the regionals, avoid a few tough matchups, you're probably going to be okay with Charizard.
Absolutely. And we're going to hop over to a deck that also never seems to die, aside from Mew. This deck has been around for a while, but now we've spiced it up a little bit. Lyric, we're going to talk about Arceus. Now, Arceus is a deck that always seems to adapt to the meta. We saw Arctina at one point. We even saw Arc Gyarados at one of these regionals, but now we're seeing Arc Regigigas with some Zacian in there. We saw Makani Tran bring this, and obviously top 8 at Portland Regionals. So are we thinking that some people will start to bring this because it does have a pretty decent meta performance overall?
So a little fun fact about me, when I first started playing, like 2 years ago, 1 year ago, whatever you want to say, my first deck, when I went on little TCG player best Pokemon deck to pick up, it was Arc Intel. I didn't know how to use Scoop Up Net, and quite frankly, I never did. I was always a discard and whatever. But I think Starbirth is just too good of a move, man. You just get to go pick 2 things out from the deck that you want. I think Arceus and Regigigas together make a very bulky combo, and I think that's kind of why it's being played. Regigigas, I gotta say, was not expecting that at all. But I don't think Miraidon. Wow, I'm really one track mind here. I don't think Arceus is gonna go anywhere because you do get to power up your other Pokemon every time you attack with the Arceus. Starbirth is just way too good, being able to go on ahead and just grab what you need every single time. And we're now pairing it with Pokemon that are a little bit more, tanky, bulky, and we also have that Zacian now that we can, swing for those higher amounts. Granted, if we have like that psychic energy there, it's just a very exciting time to look back at Arceus because so many decks have been printed, since Arceus kind of came out, and Arcdura. I believe, or Duraludon's rotating, so we won't see that anymore. But Arc is staying. Arc is forever at this point.
Here. Well, we love to see it, and obviously Starbirth for 2 is way better than Forest Sealstone for 1. So Maddox, do you think that we're going to see a little bit more adaptation in the list? Do we think that, obviously another path deck out there, do you think that we're going to see more of Arceus come into this meta for Charlotte?
Yeah, I think the brilliant part about Arceus is that there's the joke that you can play a 4/3 Arceus V-Star line and then just pick your favorite V or VMAX out of the binder and just throw it in there, and it's probably going to be solid. Again, just being able to search for those 2 cards and pull off a Judge Path or anything that you want like that. It gives a lot of options that if people have that favorite, that favorite V or VMAX that they want to play, then they can include it, right? I was at locals and player made top 8 with Arceus, Rayquaza VMAX, Zero Aura VMAX, right? So just like you can throw it together the wildest piles and it'll work. I think anyone, that is looking to see big success with Arceus, really want to start with Makani's list. Their crew's been running it for a while and it's just so incredibly solid and just synergizes well. But the great part about Arceus is you throw in whatever V you want. Maybe there's an E-Block V that you want to give one last ride before it rotates. Now's a chance for that.
Absolutely. And Zach, would you agree or disagree that maybe Arceus is that sleeper pick? People are going to pull it, dust it off from their binder, and start to look at Makani's list a little bit more seriously going into this meta.
So I think if there's an event not to run Arc, I think this would be the event not to run Arc. I think Tina is the worst matchup by far for the deck. Tina is probably going to go Stonks. If it wasn't for the last making it finals at the last 2 U.S. regionals, it also was like the star of the show of the Bradner versus Gearhart showdown. I think that Tina Stonks are just up right now, and Arceus, you're not going to find any comfortable way to really beat that matchup off the top. If you do, then go for it, but that's going to be really your tough matchup. And if you do find a way to beat it, I'm not sure if you're able to handle the metagame. So Arceus fans, play whatever you want, but viewer be warned.
Yeah, agreed. I know that obviously hitting 280 into a lot of the Arceus without V-Guard energy, because V-Guard is another key part of that deck, but Regigigas V-Star is something that we don't see every day. So Dan, what do you think of the spicy play in there? Obviously you're just bopping things in that deck with your Giratina. You get down to that last prize and they haven't used their V-Star yet, and you go, whoa, I guess I'm going to get bossed. And then they're going to use the V-Star and knock that Giratina out of here. Do you think that we're going to see that maybe on stream? Do you think that somebody can pull it off who's brave enough to take an Arceus deck to this regional?
I think that's a little hard to pull off because you're so reliant on Starbirth typically to set up. So if you can skip Starbirth, that is going to be a highlight play right there. I think I agree with Zach. I think Arceus' worst matchup by far is Giratina, but I think there are so many decks that basically say, you know what, my Tina matchup sucks, but I can beat everything else, so we're okay. And I agree. I think Tina's going to be played a lot, but Tina's really hard to play effectively. You can, I think Maddox mentioned it a little earlier, you lose yourself the game more often than any deck beats you. So I think people's matchup into Tina is probably more positive than the actual like true stats, or if someone like PJU or Zach or someone was playing against them, it would show. So I think Arc could still be fine. It's cool, it's fun, but you still have the risk of putting down a basic V that Miraidon can take out. You're still two-shotting Charizards, and by the end of the game, Charizard is one-shotting you. Like, there's just a ton of kind of landmines to hit. Like, Mew VMAX, dude, you get 4 fusion energy down, 1 modifier, and Regigigas goes bye-bye. Like, there's a lot of ways to play around the strategy you're going with, but with that said, Judge Path is an excellent archetype, and you could pair any Pokemon with it, and Judge Path is a good move. So I think you could definitely see some success, but I think if you do hit some good Tina players, if you hit some good Zard players, if you hit Miraidon that's firing all cylinders, I think it'd be really, really hard to make a deep run with the deck.
I could see that for sure. But what we're going to do now is talk about top decks. We're going to flip it over to this part of the Meta Forecast. So, Maddox, we're going to hit it over to you. We're going to go round table here with this question. What are your top 3 picks for decks going into Charlotte Regionals?
Yeah, going into Charlotte, I need to start out, pretty vanilla and say, Giratina vstar. Again, seeing a lot of success right now. Yes, it is the deck to beat, but again, if you are a good pilot of Giratina vstar, I think that you have, uncapped potential for success at Charlotte, piloting the deck well. Definitely be ready for the mirror match, but again, into everything else, right? You theoretically don't have any terrible matchups. The one matchup that is a little tricky, which would be my second pick, would be Mew VMAX, right? Fusion or DTE, both going to be effective at, helping swing things for Giratina. You have a lot of options, and again, just this raw power of the deck, and, draw up the 6 from your hand multiple times a turn is just going to be strong. You see so many cards, it gives you so many options to do so many different things. After that, if you're a skilled enough pilot again, and you're playing fast enough, Gardevoir is just going to be a great play. Strong enough to go run the table. Bodie Robinson did a great job with it, and again, just picking a solid list that will be able to play the game and just know that, hey, you got to win 2 games a lot of times. Get to that game 3, play it quick, and you'll have a good time.
Awesome. All right, and Zach, back over to you. Do you agree or disagree with Maddox? What are the top 3 decks for Charlotte Regionals?
Was that for me? Was that for Zach?
It's for Zach, yes.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, perfect. I'm glad that you asked, because I was about to ask too, and you saved me the tough question. Okay. Is it my top 3 personal, or is it the top 3 that I think are overall well positioned?
Your 3 personal.
My 3 personal, okay. So my top 1 is Tina right now. I think I'm going to look at it and be like, I think I've earned like 450 points with Tina or something this season. Probably shouldn't mess with what's seeing success. A few other regionals, I got a little too fancy by playing like Jolteon VMAX and stuff. Like, not my best decision I've ever made. Do I think so? Tina's probably number 1. Number 2 is probably Zard, just as a default. I've also Zard's another deck that I've seen a lot of success with this season. So I could easily see myself just kind of going back to that, bringing it back to basics. Third for me is Roaring Moon. I think that Roaring Moon seems really well positioned in this format, especially as I look at the Ancient Booster Energy Capsule. I think that's what it's called. Yes. Putting that on makes it difficult for Tina to win, at least in my experience. So if you have a good match against Tina, I feel like you beat Mew most of the time. I feel like you beat Snorlax. I feel like you beat Control. Snorlax Control, Rapid Strike. There's a handful of lists or decks that I think that you beat. And if I can get it working, I wouldn't be surprised to see myself playing it. So something very similar to what Brandon Bond's been doing with the Radiant Greninja Ancient Energy Booster Capsule builds sounds really cool.
Yeah, very cool. I like those 3 for sure. Obviously, we're going to be playtesting the day before the event for all those out there. Zach and I will be out and about with the rest of the Shuffle Squad testing. But Dan, let's hop over to you. Dan, what are your top 3? Are they all Tina, all 3 of them? Or do you have other top decks that you would possibly play if somebody ate your Tina cards?
I'm pretty sure I'm legally required to play Giratina V-Star to every event for the next couple months. There's no doubt about it. Legit, this is actually one of the events where I'm nervous about playing Tina because everyone is going to throw the kitchen sink at it, like Manaphy, Jirachi, like vacuums, everything. So I think you can still beat those decks, and I beat a couple decks in Portland that were playing both Manaphy and Jirachi. So you can do it, but it's going to be hard, I think. So I'm going to be exhausted after day one, no matter what my
Sweating.
record is. But I do think I think Tina V-Star is the best deck in format, and when in doubt, just play the best deck and don't kind of put yourself at a disadvantage walking in. My second choice actually would be Roaring Moon with the ancient booster capsules and the like, because number one, it's just fun, man. You just get to blow things up. That's awesome. And having 290 HP, not having to frenzy gouging all the time in order to take knockouts, and I'm going to regret saying this for myself, throwing a Jirachi in, I think could actually be a really, really big deal because that's really a loss condition a lot of time, is if someone stalls you out and tries to take advantage of the fact that you've had to do a ton of damage to yourself. So if you counter your main weaknesses with those booster capsule and with Jirachi, and even throwing something in like Pokemon catchers to accelerate the game and kind of go back to the classic Mew VMAX, I think that deck could be super, super scary. And then if I had to pick a third one, I know some of my friends are on the Miraidon train. I'd probably play Miraidon too, just because, again, it's just fun to blow things up. And I think the experience share can be a big, big deal, because if you can actually use a couple different attackers and not just blow up the active, but do some tricky things, like there's probably more outplay potential there than people give it credit for. So those would probably be my top three.
And then Lyric, last but not least, what are your top 3 picks going into Charlotte Regionals right now?
So top 3 picks as in like top 8ing, or just like decks that we think we're gonna just do really
decks
well?
in order
those
that
lists,
you
believe it
would
or not, are
personally
two very
play.
different things.
Like what 3 decks are you sleeving up, and those are the only 3 decks you're taking with you in your suitcase to go play at Charlotte Regionals?
So the 3 decks that I already have sleeved up and the 3 decks that are already in my suitcase are Miraidon, Roaring Moon, and Charizard.
Okay.
Because go fast is fun, and that's why Roaring Moon is there. But if I have to speak from the very logical standpoint, Tina is great. I think you do sleeve up the Tina and you bring it. I do think if you are the Mew VMAX lover, get your last licks with the deck, man. Go out, enjoy it. If you go 0-3 drop, who cares? Your deck's rotating soon. Get like your last couple plays with it. So for me, it's going to be Tina, Mew, Charizard. But personally, I really think a Cloth Electrode's going to do well this weekend for some reason. I said this at the last Meta forecast that I was on, and I'm a full believer in this thing. I've seen what it can do. It's getting higher and higher placements every single time that we see it at a regional. Same thing with Roaring Moon.
All right.
We're going to be seeing Cloth Electrode.
Put the Electrode down. Wait for the next segment here. Okay. We're going to go into, now that we've got our top 3 decks out of our system, and no one has said Chen Pao yet, we're on track for a good regional forecast. But let's go over to my favorite segment, which is the wild rogue decks that we all think are going to be good. So Zach, we'll kick it off with you and let me know what rogue deck that hasn't necessarily performed well yet you think will perform at this regional.
So I actually have 2.
Okay.
And the first one that I want to go with is Goldango.
Okay.
I've heard a lot of players from top groups. They're experimenting with Goldango Palkia right now. I think that a lot of their lists are probably going to be really similar to what Cal Connor played at the Tournament of Doom. I mean, he came second over 300 players, has good match on paper against Tina and Charizard. We'll see if that can pull up to Charlotte Regionals and overcome the other 2,000 plus masters. The other one that I've heard through the grapevine is people are experimenting with Lugia again. So I think that those are really the 2 that, I mean, I think Lugia is probably like, they think it beats Tina. They think it beats Charizard. I think a lot of this is like, we've had the Paradox Rift format since November. We really haven't had like, we don't even have the holiday set for this one. Nothing's really changing, so people are starting to go like really digging through the bulk bins and trying to think about what beats the top 2 decks in format.
Gotcha. Okay, very cool. And Dan, is there a rogue deck that you have in mind, or a couple of rogue decks that you really want to see do well for this event?
I mean, I didn't want to see Lugia do well. I'm gonna be straight up with you guys. I think that could be I think that is a high roll kind of play though. If you hit a ton of Tinas, you're probably gonna have a good time. But if you hit Miraidon, if you hit Charizard, if you hit 98% of the rest of the meta, you're gonna get toasted. So wouldn't recommend it. I do think Goldango is better than people give it credit for. So I could actually see that doing well. There are a couple in day 2, and I think it has all the tools to be real scary for a lot of things. So I think it could be pretty good. And honestly, I think that's kind of the big one. The meta's kind of well established, and because it's so wide, it's not that this big counter deck can come into play. So my guess would either be Goldango, or someone will have a really, really clever Lost Shenanigans list, whether it be the 7 Deadly Sins or whatever it's called, or something like that. That's what I could see happening, is a really cool Lost Zone list that just hits the right matchups and calls having the right cool pieces.
Absolutely.
In it.
And I do think that we'll probably see a couple of funny Lost Zone decks for sure. Goldango is a deck that, as a Tina player, I've gone to game 3 at Portland in day 1, and they got out of Roxanne Path twice in game 3. So it's a little scary for sure as a Tina player. Because they do sometimes have the outs. Now, without saying Cloth or Electrode in this next sentence, Lyric, what do you think that the best wild rogue deck would be for Charlotte?
First of all, it's not a bad call. It's not a meme. Second of all, it's crazy how we're calling Lugia now a rogue deck, because I do believe it won a regional earlier this season. God. I'm on the Goldango train. I do think it needs some ironing out. We haven't seen it perform at its peak potential just yet. Shout outs to our Shuffle Squad team member Kyle Rios, who plays both Cloth Electrode and Goldango and is currently decided between the two for Charlotte. I've seen him absolutely smack Charizards. I've seen him brick. That's the deck in a nutshell, right? Can you get those VIP passes out? Can you get, your coin bonuses and all that stuff? I do think it is a deck that can be susceptible to Path, though. And, we're talking about Tina that does play Path. Miraidon does play Path. So Mew does play Path. So now it's kind of a riskier call to say that. I do want to see the Roaring Moon take it all the way. We saw a great Roaring Moon stream match last weekend at Portland where it just fired on all cylinder, and it was great. And I really do want to also play it myself. I'm just sticking to what I know. That is the TCG rule, that you stick to what you know, you play what you want to play. But Cloth Electrode, yes, but Goldango, yes, and also Roaring Moon, yes. Literally, just go have fun. I want to see Superior vstar also do it too.
Okay.
I want to see everybody do it and have fun.
Right.
So yeah,
that's what we play the game of Pokemon here. Obviously, my favorite rogue deck will always be a control deck. So I do think that control still has some legs to stand on. Might not be very sturdy legs, but it's still got some legs. But I am going to go out here and say that I would like to see a mill deck do well. And I think that Wug Trio might be the deck if you want to play some spice and come at a regional playing some Wug Trio mill. Might be the way. I've seen some Durant out there playing some mill too with Spite Ops, all kinds of wacky controls. So if you love playing wacky decks, I know that you're probably going to Charlotte playing in this giant event. So that would be a deck I would love to see make top cut. Just, probably don't have many regionals left in you. Obviously, Durant's going to rotate. So I would love to see a mill deck here. So that kind of wraps it up for this meta forecast going into Charlotte regionals. Hopefully you took something away. If you're going to play one of these decks, maybe you got some helpful insights. Maybe this helped you out. I'm going to kick it back over to all of our guests here on the Shuffle Squad today. That way they can let you know exactly where you can find them out in the wild or maybe at the next event. So we'll go back to you, Zach. Zach, where can everybody find you?
You could find me anywhere where the Shuffle Squad is, and on the Twitter sphere at Zach Lesage PTCG. I also offer full-time coaching, whatever you need, at metafy.gg/@Zach Lesage. So hit me up there. That'd be really cool. Hopefully you see a lot of y'all at Charlotte's.
Cool. And then Dan, where can the people find you, and what shout outs do you have for us here?
Yeah, everyone can find me at DanTheTrainer25 on Twitter. Also part of the Nerd Rage Gaming team. Absolutely love those guys. They're awesome. And also the store is incredible. And we are doing weekly streams for our locals now. We're finally getting it going consistently. So Thursday nights, I'm going to commentate it more often than not. And I love it. It's a blast. And we have our big old League Hub / local special event February 18th, where we'll probably have a little under 100 players, which is awesome. But then also shout out just Kevin Grieger, Brian Prusak, Ben Doberstein, and then everyone I test with. Just, it is a good group. Very grateful to have found those kind of friends and just
awesome.
Be a part of the community here.
And kicking it over to you, Lyric, where can the people find you out in the wild here for the Pokemon TCG?
As always, you guys can find me on all platforms at Lyric of Wisdom. Shout outs to the Shuffle Squad, of course. You guys can find me casting late night on Wednesdays, and at your local tri-state locals. I go to literally all of them because I'm a grinder. And you guys can find me at Charlotte Regionals this weekend with that camera. Charlotte tournament vlog for the Shuffle Squad is, of course, coming back. Glad to see that everybody liked it the first one.
Awesome. And Maddox, last again but not least, but where can everybody find you here in the Pokemon atmosphere?
Yeah, in order to catch up with me, you can find me on Twitter at MaddoxTCG. If you like long-form content like this and these meta forecasts, I really encourage you to check out the Beach Court podcast. I do work with Eric and Parker, our locals out in Jacksonville, on that, and really just trying to hype up the Pokemon trading card game. We'll talk a lot about the meta and kind of, similar ways, and also talk about our previous tournament experiences. So encourage you to check that out. And always got to give a shout out to the Route 904 and the Nakama Anime Cafe, doing a great job supporting me. If you're in Northeast Florida, encourage you to come by and just enjoy some anime, some karaoke, some tasty food, and some good times. So come on out.
Awesome. And thank you so much to all of our guests here and all of the sponsors that help make videos like these possible. You can check them out down below in the description of this video here. And also make sure that you're checking out all of our affiliate links where you can save money on awesome Pokemon product too. I'm PJ, as always, here on the Shuffle Squad. It was great having you for this meta discussion. We'll see you next time here on the Shuffle Squad.
Want to support the Shuffle Squad? Be sure to check out all of our sponsors in the description to pick up Pokemon TCG singles, sealed, and PTCG live codes. You made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching this entire video from the Shuffle Squad. Honestly, from the bottom of our hearts, we appreciate each and every person that supports our content, watches what we have going on every single day, every single week, even from time to time, and continuously allows us to have a forum to project our creative content towards the Pokemon TCG community. So if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment to help boost the YouTube algorithm. That being said, we'll catch you with our next video. Thanks again. Take it easy.